Am I clear on my North Star? Am I clear on my life mission? And if the answer's no, to get clear on it.
Hi, and welcome to Helping People Perform, the podcast that gives you fascinating insights into those people whose chosen vocation is to help others perform at their best. From consultants to teachers, sports coaches to financial advisors, all of my guests share a passion for getting the most out of individuals, teams, and organisations. Enjoy the episode. Hi, everybody, and welcome to another amazing episode of Helping People Perform. Delighted to be joined in the studio today by award-winning business strategist, performance coach, and best-selling author of the book North Star Thinking. So, welcome to the show today, Will Polston.
Thank you, Paul. Grateful to be here.
Absolutely, really looking forward to this conversation because I think there's so much in both your LinkedIn profile and the conversations we've had and the communications we've had up to now that align so well with this theme of this podcast, which is helping others perform at their best. But before we get into that and a bit more about what you do now, maybe you can give us a bit of your backstory. How did you get to where you are today?
Great question. So, I'll do the short version, and if you want to unpack it, then we
Yeah.
can do. But the short version is I grew up with a belief that money equaled happiness, and I went on a tangent to make as much money as I could as early as I could, and then 11 years ago, I had a realization that 11 years ago, I had a big realization that my real driver was nothing to do with money. It was never really about money. It was to do with my dad and how my
Okay.
dad hadn't achieved certain things he was capable of, and the impact that had on him and my mum and me and my family and a whole host of other people. And I
Mm.
just vowed in that moment, I don't want anyone else to have to go through the suffering that he went through and we went through. So I vowed in that moment I would be committed to anything to do with human awareness, human potential, human behavior to,
Mm.
in the sort of your words, help people perform and help people achieve what it is that they can actually do to benefit not only them, but their family, their friends, their community, society, humanity, and the
Right.
universe.
Superb. I mean, and so what did that look like for you? You said you were in this pursuit of money. What was that career for you? Where did it take you, and how
Well,
did that go for you?
what I suppose it depends on what age. I mean, from 10, 11 years old, it was buying and selling stuff at school. It was buying stuff out the paper and sell it on eBay. And then at 14 years old, I started working in a bar, which I shouldn't have been working in. And being a pot boy, which was good fun when you're 14 years old and you get to be in an environment with 18 plus year olds
Yeah.
every weekend on a Friday and Saturday night. It was good fun. Um, did that for a couple of years, and then yeah, just buying and selling clothes and really buying and selling anything that
Right.
I could do. Eventually, then found myself as and I'm in a whole nother story. Eventually found myself working in financial services,
Mm.
and that was great because I thought that I was going to become a millionaire working there, and I eventually ended up running a division of a stock brokerage,
Mm.
and yeah, that was that.
Right. And through that time, were you sort of convincing yourself that this was success and this was performance in your mind? Is that what was going through, or did you always
Yeah.
have that niggling thought in the back of your mind that this isn't right?
Um, so I've reflected on this a lot.
Mm.
And was there a niggling thought that this isn't right? There wasn't. There
Right.
wasn't. It was so deeply unconscious, and I'm gonna explain that in more detail because I've never actually spoken about this.
Mm.
The the reason why it wasn't feeling look, don't get me wrong, it got to a point where there was just stuff, let's call it traditional success, you want to call it that. There wasn't many 20, how old was I? There wasn't many 22-year-olds that owned a detached house with a double garage, a gated drive, drove convertible cars, had I could had various watches,
Mm.
let's call it external success.
Yeah.
Um, I had. I would not think about ever spending money to buy food or any of that kind of stuff. I'd created quite a privileged
Mm.
position for myself. But what I think was the reason why I didn't feel the discontentment so much was that for as long as I can remember, I had been operating in my, let's call it, albeit it's changed now, was my zone of genius.
Right.
So the things that like, I loved selling, I
Mm.
loved communicating, I loved talking, I loved being around aspirational people. So the period of time from sort of leaving school to before I found myself working in financial services, this is worth explaining, was that I wanted to be a multimillionaire.
Right.
And the I love designer clothes. That's where when I was earning money as a young kid, when I was, I don't know, 14 years old, when my mates' mums were giving them £5 to be able to get the bus to the local town and go and buy McDonald's, and that's what we were doing on Saturday. I had like £200 a week that I'd
Right.
earned myself, and I was going and buying a pair of brand new trainers every week. And I was doing this kind of stuff at 13 or 14 years old. So I that kind of, and then I eventually found myself wanting to work for a designer clothes shop. And this designer clothes shop at the time was in Chelmsford in Essex, where I'm from, and in the UK. And it was the only shop in the world at the time that sold Gucci, Prada, Dolce Gabbana, and Etro, um, in the same shop that was an independent shop outside of a city in the world. It was the only one in the world that did that.
Right.
And the clientele was quite aspirational, professional footballers, property developers, stockbrokers. There were some questionable characters too, like some drug dealers and stuff, but there
Right.
was it was an interesting place to be. And I remember that there was an industry legend called Neil Bounds. And Neil Bounds set up a shop also in Chelmsford, designer
Mm.
clothes shop, and that shop failed. And when that shop failed, I remember at 17 years old, or maybe just turned 18 at that point, I remember thinking, wow, if Neil can't do it, then there's no way I'm going to be able to do it. So I
Right.
need to find another way of being able to become a multimillionaire. And
Mm.
fortunately for me, as I mentioned, a lot of my clientele were property developers, stockbrokers, professional footballers, and drug dealers. All of
Mm.
which, or I say all of which, the majority of which were multimillionaires. So I thought it's fine. I just need to pick one of those four careers. Um, and I'm rubbish at football, so it wasn't football, and I didn't have loads of money to be a property developer, so I was left with one or two options: either become a drug dealer or get involved in financial services. And I think to my mum's delight, I got involved in financial services. But um, I yeah, that was what happened. And but when I worked in financial services, and even when I worked in the clothes shop, I was doing things I enjoyed doing. I was talking all day. I would
Mm.
even now. I had a realization about 6 months ago that I just don't. Well, if I say realization 6 months ago, I had a realization a long time ago. I just do not like writing emails. I do not writing full stop. I would rather do a voice note or do a video or call someone than send them an email because I just don't want to do it.
Yeah.
And back then, I think because I was in a very fortunate position that I was constantly selling, I was doing things that I was good at. It wasn't like I've never. I'm really careful when I use the word never and always, but
Mm.
no, there was a time actually where had a job that I didn't enjoy, but I've almost always loved the work that I do,
Right.
and it that for me was key because
Mm.
I didn't have that niggle. You know how some people that have a job and they just hate going to
Yeah.
work every day and they enjoy it. I've not had that. There was only one time when that was the case, and it was
Mm.
actually funny because I was working as a barman in a pizza restaurant, and every now and then they asked me to be a waiter because they were short on staff. That I didn't enjoy, but other than that,
Right.
everything I've ever done, I've enjoyed.
Fantastic. I mean, it's always interesting because people, as you say, they've either got that thought constantly in the back of the head that this isn't for me. I want a different life. I want to be doing something else. But it does happen for some people that you're enjoying what you do, and then one day you'll have a realization. It might be a slow build, it might be an instantaneous piece. But what was your sort of moment of clarification, the sort of awakening moment that
Yeah,
got you there?
good good question. So it was 11 years ago, and
Mm.
I was at an event with a well-known personal development expert called Tony Robbins, and doing his Unleash the Power Within event. And it was when he was sharing the Thanksgiving story, and it was just this metaphor, this perfect metaphor for me. And I call it my lightning moment because bam, it just hit me. And I cried my eyes out for about 15 minutes because that was the moment that I realized my real driver was nothing to do with money. It was never really about money. It was to do with dad. Dad hadn't
Right.
achieved certain things he was capable of, and the impact that had on him and my mum and me and my family and a whole host of other people.
Mm. No, I mean, obviously Tony Robbins. He's famous for a reason. His stuff is really hard hitting, and when it does hit you, it's in a big way. So, you've obviously taken that and you've moved into what you do now. So, tell us a bit more about what you do now in terms of who you help and how you help them.
So my North Star is to empower people to transform excuses into results and live a life they love. So anything that I'm doing is revolving around that to some degree.
Yeah,
And sort of practically speaking, the coaching business, we've got various different services from online memberships to online coaching programs, in person mastermind groups that we run, one on one stuff that we do, um, sort of another form of membership, if you want to call it that. But all around having people that have an aspiration for their life to be better, personally,
right.
professionally, or financially,
Yeah,
and and are willing to do the work to achieve that.
yeah. No, that's brilliant because I think there's a couple of things that I've seen both in terms of the setup that you've got and with others who are successful in this area as well is there's, there's obviously good content in there. You know, there's the coaching methodologies, the approaches, the frameworks, but it's the community and building that community of individuals who will inspire you, keep you accountable, and and sort of move you forward in a way that you probably didn't think you were able to on your own. So,
Mm.
what's the community look and feel like within your coaching world?
Great question. It took me about 6 years to work out one word. And because I've worked with people that are startup business owners, I've worked with people that have exited businesses, I've worked with people that um, have that are professional athletes, celebrities, like what, and I could never quite nail. You'd sit down with these marketing people and they go, "So tell me about the demographic." I'm like, what do you mean demographic? There's demographics. There's multiple different people. So there's more of a psychographic, generally speaking, when they first come to working with us, which is that they're in what I call the rift. So they're feeling stressed, they're overwhelmed, they're
Right.
frustrated, they might be depressed, they're anxious, they're dissatisfied, if you want to put it in one
Mhm.
word, with life or business to some degree. But actually, the one word that it took me to realize that was the common theme between everyone was ambitious.
Right.
They're ambitious to a degree where they want to be, do, and have more in life.
Mm. I think I'm just looking up over your shoulder here, and for people who aren't on the video, you know, you've got that quote there. Some people want it to happen. Some people would wish it would happen, and others make it happen. I think for me, when it comes to ambition, everybody's got a desire for the outcome. Ambition for me talks about the willingness to work for the outcome. And I think
Mm,
I often have the conversation with my 10-year-old boy, and it's like, it's not what you want, it's what you're willing to work for. So it's like, if you ask yourself, I want that outcome, but are you willing to work for it? Because if you're not willing to work for it, you don't really want it. Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
you
There's
think you need
that's
it.
super powerful. There's a woman whose name I can't remember. Dr. Maria Nimith is her name actually. She wrote a book called something to do with money, the power of money, the energy of money. Great book. And she talks about the distinction between willing and wanting.
Right.
And it is so interesting because you go, well, I want this. Yeah, okay, I want it. You go, I'm willing to do X for this. It just
Yeah.
changes the
Yeah.
dynamic so much, which is exactly what you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, brilliant! I haven't heard of that book myself. I must look it up, and I'll put the link, like everything else, in the show notes here. Speaking of books and great books, you talked about your North Star, and that's your book, isn't it? The North Star Thinking. So tell us a
It
bit more about
is
the book.
North
Yeah.
Star thinking. There it is for people that are watching on video. So,
Yeah.
um, people ask me often, so North Star thinking, master your mindset and live a life you love is the subtitle of the book. And people ask me, why did you write a book? And what's really interesting is that the first personal development book that I ever read was called The Secret.
Mm.
And for me, what was really interesting about The Secret, many people have maybe heard of the Secret because there's a film about it as well, and it's about the law of attraction. It's written by a woman called Rhonda Byrne.
Mm.
And what that book did for me when I first read it was it made me realize that I'd actually been applying a lot of this stuff without realizing. So it became
Mm.
conscious of things that I'd been doing without realizing that I was doing it, which was quite interesting. What my book is about is I've studied loads of different modalities, from sort of ancient wisdom like Stoicism and Hermetism, right through to New Age um, psychology like neurolinguistic programming and various elements of quantum physics and elements of spirituality and all of this stuff on my own personal journey. And one of the things that I think is a strength of mine is that I have an ability of taking quite complex stuff and simplifying it. You know, what some people might say in a chapter, I can say in a sentence or a paragraph or whatever. And sometimes I oversimplify stuff too. But what I wanted to do was just create a resource, and lots of people in this industry, they use a book as like a form of fancy business card, or it's like a lead magnet. They give like a tiny little surface level bit of information, and then you've got to sign up for the course to really get the value out of it or whatever. And I wanted to create something that someone could read from cover to cover, do the work. So when I say about do the work, every chapter has a whole bunch of questions that I encourage people to not actually move to the next chapter until they've done the question. So it becomes more of a workbook than it does actually a reading book.
Nice.
And work through that. In fact, I created, I think it's about an 80-page PDF workbook that you can download with additional questions and resources to go through and work through on the back of it. So basically, what I'm trying to say is I wanted to create something that people could read from cover to cover, even if they never did anything with me,
Right.
and it had the ability to transform their life. Because the difference between there's a big difference between knowing information and creating transformation.
Right.
And that's really what I wanted the book to be about, is
Mm.
creating transformation.
Brilliant. And I'm just looking down at my notes here because you made one point there about this point of you're already doing a lot of the things in the books that in the books that you've read, and the wisdom that you're finding is that reflection of actually I'm doing a lot of this stuff. I'm maybe not aware of it, or I don't have the words for it. I've found that with a lot of clients and with a lot of people I've worked with, in that it's giving things a name helps them realize, actually, oh, that's what I'm doing. That's the process I'm following it
Mm,
by a different name than I think of it, or by actually giving it a name compared to just that's what I do. Allows them not only to reflect on that, but do it again and do it again better going forward. And I think that's the critical element, isn't it? That people, whoever you are and however ambitious you are, you're looking to improve. You're not starting from a base of zero. You've got your life experience and all of your great work so far, and then you're just building on top of that. And I think that's quite often, if people find themselves in that rift, and that dissatisfied mindset that you talk about, there can often be that negative element of, I'm starting from scratch here. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm doing nothing. But it's a good point to remind people of, really, isn't it?
without a doubt. And yeah, that's what it was for me. It's like, oh, right, so that's what I was doing then, and that's what I was doing. That was that particular moment. Don't get me wrong, there was other stuff in the book that I was like, in fact, it's funny. That particular book I reread every holiday. It's every summer holiday I go on. I normally take anywhere between 3 and 5 books, and that is one of the books that is a non-negotiable for me to reread. So I reckon I've read it 15 times, physically read. I mean, you saw the state of the book. It's battered, absolutely battered. I watched the DVD multiple times, and what's fascinating, and this is about books in general, like any book pretty much, is that people ask me all the time, well, what book should I read?
Mm.
And the thing that I always ask them is, well, what's the biggest challenge you're having right now? Because not all book, well, I say not all books, the book that's going to be most helpful is the one that's helped solve the biggest challenge you've got at the moment. And what's great about a good book is that you can read it over and over and over again, and each time take something new from it because you're at a different place.
Yes. Yeah. No, I love that, and I think that's a very good point to remind people of it. And maybe it's one of those questions you can put back to people in terms of what book do I need to read at the moment. It's actually, well, what books have you read that have made an impact in this area? Go back and read that again.
Yeah,
with a
for sure.
different mindset, and that rereading is a critical piece. And I take it then when you're reading books, are you a fan of the physical book versus electronic or audio book? How do you
Yeah,
consume that?
it's I the majority of the time I will listen to books,
Right.
and that's a time thing. It's a
Mm.
time thing and it's an attention thing. So I'll listen to books anywhere between on 2 and 3 times speed on Audible when
Yeah.
I'm driving. And I find that when I'm driving and I listen to books on 2 or 3 times speed, because driving's so subconscious, then
Mm.
it helps. I can't, funnily enough, listen to a book on 2 or 3 times speed. If I'm on the train, for example, I've got my headphones in, I just can't do it. There's just something, whether I'm on the train or I'm doing something else other
Right.
than driving, I can't do it. Um, I probably only read physical books, maybe 10 a year, which in comparison, bearing in mind I'm doing 50 on Audible,
Right.
it's a much smaller amount.
Mm.
And it may not even be as much as 10. And I say 10, five of those I'll read in one week. So
Right.
on holiday, and then the other
Yeah.
five I'll drip throughout the rest of the year.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, there'll be other books that I just think are far better to have the physical copy of the book, because you can go through and highlight it and reflect back on it. And
Mm.
I mainly listen to personal development and entrepreneurship books. And when I'm listening to them, there might be one or two little nuggets I'm looking to take from each book,
Mm.
because I'm so much of what I'm hearing is relearning the same stuff that I already know. Whereas there's
Mm.
other stuff. If I was going to a brand new topic, I don't know, if I was starting to learn about geology, then
Yeah.
there's going to be so much new stuff that I might want to read a physical book so I can make notes and whatnot.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, brilliant. And I just got one final question in terms of the what you do today and the work you do with your clients. What does a typical transformation look like for people? What can they expect to come out with, or is it a case of there's a start and an end to working with you, or is this a journey that people are going on over a number of years?
Again, a great question. The short answer is it depends.
Mm.
Um, I've got clients that I've been working with for 8 years now, and I've got people that I started working with yesterday. So there's a real range. What we will typically do. So when I first start working with people, for people that aren't watching this, I'm
Mm.
holding an Aladdin's lamp,
Yeah.
and what we generally do is we sit down on our first session and we go, right, personally, professionally, financially, a year from now, if you had Aladdin's lamp, what would life look like? And then we go into what I call the 7 areas of life. So we look at their health and fitness, we look at their family life, we look at their relationships, we look at their attitude, we look at their career or business, we look at their finances, we look at their spiritual life, maybe their bucket list,
Mm.
and we build what at that stage for them is a stretch of what their dream life would look like. So if we could just click our fingers and change that and jump to that, they'd be like, wow, this is amazing. And then people will, when they're working with us, typically achieve that in 3 to 9 months of us working together. So it's not a case of if they achieve it, it's just how quickly are we going to do it.
Yeah.
So it's a very vague answer, because it depends on where people are at. For some people, it's starting a business. For some people, it's selling a business. For some people, it's being in a position where they've gone from working 50 working hours, 60, 70 working hours, to then not having to work at all.
Right.
For some people, it's purely about emotionally feeling content, and it's not about business or money whatsoever.
Right.
um it really can vary, but yeah, not these days, at least 90% of the people I'm working with already have a business, and we're helping them to some degree, whether that's get their time back, but whether it's have more time, make more money, or have less stress. It could be
Right.
kind of a combination of those three.
Yeah. So it's about understanding those performance goals and helping them to get there. Essentially, is what I'm hearing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Brilliant stuff. And you've touched on it a little bit in terms of the books that you read, the audio books and things like that. But what else do you do that helps you perform at your best?
Oh, great question. So aside from sort of practicing what I preach in terms of having a North Star, having a North Star trajectory, or you can even explain that. So for me, a North Star is a mission in life that's the equivalent of trying to empty the sea with a spoon. So having that mission, identifying that mission, knowing what that is, reverse engineering that into goals. So having, whether it might be 20-year, 10-year, 5-year, 3-year, 1 year, 90-day goals that are all aligned. I reread that most weeks. That
Right.
document I'll reread most weeks because it keeps me engaged. It engages my what's known as a reticular activating system, which is the part of your brain that enables you to focus. Um, I will acknowledge the progress of my monthly goals each week, my quarterly goals at the end of each month, my quarterly goals at the end of my yearly goals at the end of each quarter, and so on and so forth. Um, I'm a big fan of morning routines,
Right.
and there's a few things that I do. So I meditate most mornings. I have a cold shower, or finish with a cold shower. And people say, "Why do you do that?" Well, there are some health benefits, but the number one reason is because I start my day doing something I don't want to do. Yeah, no, nobody wants to have a cold shower, really,
Yeah.
but doing it helps me to create discipline. I read daily affirmations. I'll practice gratitude most mornings by writing down things I'm grateful for that have happened or grateful that I want to happen. So those help me keep good stead. Eating wellish,
Mm.
exercising. Um, what else would I say? Um, Learning, constantly learning, surrounding myself with great people. Um, and if I was to pick something else, I would say really protecting my time. So I don't
Right.
believe in time management. Time management doesn't exist, but what exists is priority management. So
Mm.
I'm pretty strict on prioritizing my time and and looking to be efficient and effective with my time so that I get to do the stuff that I love doing.
Yeah. Oh, some great lessons there and some great things that people can pick up and find the things that work for them and help themselves perform in their own right. And yeah, through conversations with other guests and my own things as well, it's like you don't have to try and do all of these things at once. In fact, it's probably best to start with one and master that and build on from there, isn't it? Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, even myself, if I go on holiday, for example, and I choose to have a break from doing the stuff that I'm doing, I don't go back straight into the full flown
Right.
element of what I was doing before. It's for me, it's a little bit like going to the gym. If you're used to being in the gym and doing some reps and sets, I don't know, bench press or whatever, you go and
Yeah.
have a 2 week break. Even in 2 weeks, you can't go straight back to lifting that weight because you've not become conditioned. So what I tend to do is I'll go back and I might take it a little bit easier, and I might go right. Well, rather than I might rather than getting back into the rhythm of doing meditation every day, I might go right. I'm going to do it 3 times this week, or as I've done this week, I've not been able to do as much exercise for a variety of different reasons in recent weeks. So this week so far, the only exercise I've done is gone on 2 hour long walks. But 2 hour long walks is better than doing nothing. And then those hour long walks will turn into doing a few runs that will turn into actually I'm now running. And I feel better about it. So I'm happy to go to the gym and compounding those things for sure.
Yeah. No, wonderful. So let me ask you a couple of questions that I ask all my guests as well. And if you could take your experience and your expertise and help anyone, any individual, or might be a team, or even an organization or a group, who would you want to help with the knowledge and expertise that you've got?
It's probably a bit of a cop out answer, but the people I'm helping at the moment,
Right.
in terms of demographic and whatnot, there is part of a longer term plan to apply various principles and some things I'm exploring at the moment, to taking these principles and making them more widely available to other people, like children, for example. Because my God,
Right.
if I know what I knew now when I
Mm.
was 8, 9, 10, 11 years old, wow, the difference
Yeah.
that would have made to my life. And there's people that I work with now that are in their 60s that are learning this stuff, going, this is incredible. This has changed my life at 60. Imagine what it would have done if I'd learned it in my teens. So for
Yeah.
me, that's part of a longer term play as well, is what can we do there in terms of sort of youth leadership skills, if you like. That's part of a longer term plan. But at the moment, it's the people that we're helping currently.
Lovely, lovely stuff. And let's flip that question around a little bit then and say, if you could sit down and have a coffee, have a meal, have a drink, or just a chat with any individual, or you could choose a few individuals if you want to, such that you could come out of that conversation and feel as if your performance was already on the way up off the back of that chat, who would you want that to be?
I'm struggling to answer this, and part of it is because the first person that comes to mind was Tony Robbins.
Right.
I had the pleasure of speaking with Tony on a few occasions. Had the pleasure of meeting him one on one, not so long ago. In fact, for those that are I've got on a frame here on my desk, for those that are watching on YouTube, I've had kind of had that experience, I guess. We were having a conversation as a team here about 6 weeks ago, and I was saying I wanted to introduce a form of what were we calling it? We were calling it a form of long. Let me see if I can find out because I've put it on a yeah, it was having some form of um way of checking in with our clients years later and seeing the impact of what had happened. Like what are they still applying, what are they not
Right.
still applying? And there's a word that will come to me probably, no doubt, as soon as we as soon as we hang up
A
this
longevity
call.
piece or something?
Yeah, it was a form of
Yeah.
longevity because it was a word beginning
Yeah.
with L, but
Yeah.
yeah, so there was a piece around that.
Mm.
Um and just trying to be able to really understand what is it, what's the long-term impact of what we've done.
Yeah.
So I guess for me is what would I love to do? I would love to be in a position in 10 years or 20 years time where someone's had that conversation, whether it's they listen to this particular podcast, Paul, or
Mm.
they heard something and they went, yeah, that one bit of nugget, that one nugget
Mm.
led to this, and this, and that stuff's cool.
Yeah. No, that's amazing stuff. So, um, and sort of final question for me. Um, if you wanted to leave this conversation, and people who are listening in, they're listening to this, they're going to leave listening to this conversation with one key point in their mind. What would you want that to be? What would you want them thinking leaving this chat?
Am I clear on my North Star? Am I clear on my life mission? And if the answer's no, to get clear on it. I don't know the full demographic of people that listen to this, but if you think about business, for example, so for the entrepreneurs, the business owners in the room, if you imagine what would it be like if you had a business without a clear business mission and business vision and business values, it would be a nightmare. If you're an employee listening to this and your company didn't have a clear mission and you didn't know what you were working towards, and you didn't know really what the objectives were, and you didn't know like really why you were doing anything, what would it be like to work in that business? And for
Mm.
most people, whether they're the employer or the employee, they'd be like, that would be an absolute nightmare.
Mm.
Yet most people live their life like it. So
Yeah.
getting clear on that, and look, it can change, it can evolve, it can develop, but yeah, that's kind of how I see it.
And I take it a very good way of helping if people are in that point now where they're thinking, what is my North Star? Maybe reading your book and following through the exercises might be a great start, eh?
Starting with the book, yeah, absolutely, it would definitely help for sure.
Yeah. And how else do people find out more? Where do they go? How do they contact you?
Yeah, best way where they're going to find everything really is going to be the website, so willpolston.com. You can connect with their various different social media uh, platforms that we're on there. You can find out about the book. You can find out about the podcast. You can do all of that by heading there.
Oh, right. In which case, you've mentioned podcast. Tell us what the podcast is about then, and who should be listening there.
Well, that is also a very good question because we're just changing the name of it. So depending on when this actually goes live, it may have already changed. So the podcast is has been called "Make It Happen with Will Polston." We're actually just rebranding it to North Star Conversations.
Brilliant. So we'll make sure we've got links in there, and as the links update, I'll go back and make sure my links update so people are always going to the right place. Um, some amazing stuff there, Will, and a great story that you've learned about. For me, some of the key learnings here is you don't have to have you can be successful. You don't have to have a huge moment of or an entire drip feed of I'm not being successful, I'm not doing great, I'm not loving what I'm doing, in order to make a change and make yourself even better and to help others along the way with it. So really admire what you're doing, love the story, and thanks so much for being on the show today, Will Polston.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me. Thanks, Paul.
Cheers. Thanks for listening to today's episode. If you liked what you heard, then please give the podcast a rate, review and share. I'm Paul Teasdale, and from sausage making to banking, oil and gas to Formula One, I help people perform. If you'd like to find out more and have a conversation, contact me via helpingpeopleperform.com.